All right, Mikey. And as we start off this podcast, it is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And Mikey, the 26-27 schedules have been released from the NBA. Just quick thoughts on the Atlanta Hawks schedule. Man, I don't think there's a weak spot or a strong spot for this team in the schedule. I think it's a really balanced schedule.
It's a pretty balanced schedule. I think as well. Obviously last season there was late in the year where the Hawks definitely had a lower strength of schedule, and they took advantage by winning all those games, becoming one of the hottest teams in the NBA. Now, the last 5 games of this 2026-27 season definitely going to be more on the difficult side. But overall, after the trade deadline, after the All-Star break, it's certainly not the same as last season. But one thing that really caught my eye, Tim, just in general here, the first 11 days of the season, the Hawks have 2 back-to-backs and play 7 games in 11 days. That is a busy, busy first 1.5 weeks to start the season, man. That is, wow.
It definitely is. And like whenever I'm looking at the schedule, I think a lot of it has to do with the 7 games in 11 days and the opponents. I mean, you're starting out the season with Orlando, and we're just going to stop right here. And I just want to talk about the NBA and how they did this. I think this is awesome. Like, I think them scheduling Orlando and Atlanta. And Mikey, what's the great quote from Onyeka Okongwu last year?
Look, Onyeka Okongwu said, quote, "We don't really like the Magic. They don't really like us, honestly." And that's going to come into play, I think, in this game. It should be pretty fun. Should be pretty fun.
It definitely is. And whenever you go back and look at these battles with the Orlando Magic over the last 2 seasons, not just last season, you look at Vit Krejci getting hurt. You look at Jock Landale, Larry Nance, Jock Landale. Like, Goga Batadze is going to have a target on his back if he's still there. And I think that, like, this team and Orlando just don't get along. And that makes for a fun storyline to start out the season. Like, it's going to be fun. I think Orlando is going to be a pretty good team like last year. I think Atlanta, is going to build off what they started last year. It's going to be a fun matchup to start the year.
Oh, it definitely will be. And the Magic didn't make any huge roster changes, but a big change on the bench as they hired Sean Sweeney as their head coach, letting go of Jamal Mosley. So there's going to be a shift in terms of that there. But look, if we go back with the Atlanta Magic, obviously Desmond Bain throwing the ball at Onyeka Okongwu. Then you got the Jock Landale incident when Goga Bitadze did that flagrant 2 foul on him. Obviously, Jock couldn't play in the playoffs. But look, first game of the season, the Hawks are going to get a look at this Orlando Magic team. And I think early on, look, this is just two things. One, it's a great way for the NBA to just bring in the fans of both franchises, because the fans of both franchises, as you can imagine with the teams, they probably don't like each other as well. So there's going to be a lot of discourse surrounding this game. And the second reason, look, this type of matchup just gets the competitive juices flowing for both of these teams really early on in the season. Like, it's not like a game that's going to be easily won, probably by either team. The Hawks swept the Magic last year, but a lot of those games were close. And I think that this is going to be another one of those situations. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that first matchup. And it's in Orlando. The Hawks got to wait until Game 3 to have their opening night at State Farm Arena versus the Houston Rockets. But regardless, it should be a pretty entertaining first game of the season for the Hawks.
It definitely should be. I can't wait for that one. That's going to be a fun one. But for me, Mikey, if you look at the first 2 games, both of them in the Southeastern Division, like, it's going to be, crucial for the Hawks to get out to an early and quick start. And I think that's going to be huge for them this season as well. As you mentioned, seven games in 11 days. If things go south, it could go south really quick. Like, and for the Hawks, they have to find a way to find balance there. Even if you go 500 in that stretch of 7 games in 11 days, that'll help, because the schedule softens up a little bit, but this team can't just come out and start playing flat like we've seen the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, they want to get off to a good start, not save all that juice for the second half of the season. And the first five games, really 6 games of this entire schedule, is definitely not easy. look, Orlando, Charlotte, a home and home back-to-back. So Houston at State Farm Arena, then traveling to Houston, then Miami, then Cleveland. So that's six. That's six. Obviously Miami wasn't in the playoffs last season, but they got Giannis now with Bam. So obviously a huge upgrade there. That's six probable playoff teams right there. Then the Hawks face the Pelicans in New Orleans for the 7th game. And then it's Indiana, Washington, and Washington. So look, you don't really know what Washington's going to be like. They're going to be definitely more competitive than they were the last couple of years with the healthy Trae Young, healthy Anthony Davis, AJ Devonta, Keyshawn George, Alex Lar, all those guys. They're going to be way more competitive. But it's certainly not an easy first 10 games. Like out of all these 10 games, Washington, Miami, and New Orleans are the only teams that didn't make the playoffs. And obviously I just went over the upgrades that Miami and Washington made. So there's really only one game that I can see out of these first 10 that I think the Hawks will be absolutely huge favorites to win on paper. And that's going to be the New Orleans game.
Yeah, it is definitely the New Orleans game out of those. And for me, Mikey, whenever I look at November 6th, a Friday night at State Farm Arena, the return of Trae Young, Hawks fans will have that date circled on the calendar. For Trae, he didn't get to play for Washington last year after being traded back here in Atlanta. So it'll be his first official return back to State Farm Arena playing. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Now, the schedule gets a little bit more favorable as it kind of moves forward. You got a 5-game stretch right here where it looks like the Hawks can kind of gain some footing. You got Brooklyn, the Lakers, Chicago, and Milwaukee. Now Milwaukee without Giannis. Chicago got better, but I don't think they, marginally got better. The only team that you kind of have to take second glances at is the Lakers. Like you can never just count Luka out because, he's Luka and
He's that good, yeah.
Yeah, he's just that good. So, for them, I feel like that's a 5-game stretch that they can really catch their footing if things don't go their way in the first 10 games. I think they got a pretty good stretch right there to find a way to get back into it if that's the case. Now, if they do start out hot, that's another stretch where you can gain ground, and I think that'll be huge too. The Chicago game, part of the Emirates NBA Cup for the Hawks, they're in Group C. Now, in that group, it's the Hawks, Celtics, Wizards, Hornets, and Bulls. Mikey, what's your thoughts on the group? For me, it looks like, and this is me not, being a homer or anything like that. It just seems like Hawks and Celtics.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. I think the Hawks on paper here should be the second favorites to win this group behind the Boston Celtics. And who knows? We've seen the Hawks be competitive with a lot of good teams as well. Maybe they could eke one out here and sneak out and win the division, but surely, or what? Not win the division, win the group. But surely the Celtics will be the heavy favorites heading into this NBA Cup. But honestly, look, and Tim, we talked about this before we started recording. There are a lot of teams in the East that got better. I mean, off the top of my head, everybody except for Milwaukee, obviously trading away Giannis, starting a rebuild, and then Charlotte with them trading away LaMelo Ball. In my opinion, I think they will be worse than last season after that move. So everybody else, I feel like, got better. We already talked about the Wizards. The Bulls, now they're probably not going to be in the playoff picture or maybe the play-in picture yet. But getting Caleb Wilson, getting Nick Claxton, getting Norman Powell, it absolutely makes them better. Now, how much better? We don't really know. But I think it does make them better for sure. And so talk about the Wizards, talk about the Bulls, talk about the Hornets. I don't think anybody in this group is going to be just an easy cakewalk of a game. And I think a lot of teams really are emphasizing and putting focus on that 3-2-1 lottery system now, where they don't absolutely want to be at the complete bottom of the standings and have a disadvantage to try to land a high pick in the lottery for the following summer. So that's why I think you see a lot of teams just get more competitive this summer.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams got more competitive. Of course, the draft structure is a little different now, but Mikey, you mentioned the Boston Celtics. The Hawks take them on November 27th um, in Boston. Now, they have to play at TD Garden, but I will say this to Hawks fans. The Hawks have played better at TD Garden against the Celtics than they have at home.
They actually did that one game last season. I don't remember what the final score was, but they were down by, I want to say they were down by at least 50 points in that game in like the third quarter or something.
Yeah, at home it was rough. And for the Hawks, the schedule I think gets a little bit more favorable as the year kind of goes along before we get to MLK Day. Um, yeah, Portland, Phoenix, Denver. Now, Denver is going to be an interesting one, part of a little mini West Coast trip. Um, you know, with Denver, you know what you got with Jokic. Then you come back home, you got Orlando, OKC, Detroit, Charlotte, San Antonio. It's a rough sledding sketch right there.
Yeah, the mini road trip, like the Hawks will go on the West Coast road trip pretty early there with the Blazers, the Suns, and the Nuggets. But their bigger West Coast road trip is actually going to be their biggest road trip of the season, which is going to come a bit later in the schedule. We'll get to that when we do. But yeah, that mini game stretch out west, it's always probably better to break that up, especially early in the season. I don't think the Hawks would want to have such a heavy West Coast road trip such early in the season in the 20s here. So that's probably good that they break that up a little bit. But I'm specifically looking at also a matchup on November 18th at OKC, because that's going to be the return of Lou Dort and Aaron Wiggins to Oklahoma City. So there's going to be I'd imagine some pretty good standing ovations for both of those guys. Obviously, Lou Dort started many, many games there and was instrumental in their championship 2 seasons ago. So he's probably going to get a big hand. And then Aaron Wiggins, there's a huge contingent of Thunder fans that were sad to see Aaron Wiggins go. So I think he was a fan favorite there. And I think both of those guys it's going to be fun seeing them return and play against their old teammates.
It definitely is. And after that mini West Coast trip, Mikey, looking at the schedule from December 19th until January 15th, well, actually until January 22nd, the Hawks only play 4 away games. So they have a pretty good set at home. And the thing with the Hawks last year that was kind of frustrating for a lot of fans is they just played really rough at home until it got towards the end of the season. I think it almost came out to a little bit above 500 for their home schedule last year. So, for the Hawks, it would be nice to see them win a good chunk of those games at home. And a lot of that depends on the State Farm Arena crowd, having them in the building, have that 6-man jumping around. And I think that Hawks fans, after last season and seeing what that team did, I think Hawks fans are going to be really excited for what's to come this year.
Yeah, I think obviously when you make the playoffs, you want to see some improvement. I think fans will be clamoring for that, and hopefully the Hawks can deliver there. But you mentioned that big homestand, and that homestand actually features on MLK Day on January 18th, the first national TV game of the season for the Hawks. Yeah, in the entirety of the 2026 portion of the season, the Hawks don't have a nationally televised game, but their first is on MLK Day against the Sixers at home, and that's notable there because the Hawks should be playing at home on MLK Day. But that's going to be probably the most anticipated matchup of the season, because in what could be LeBron James' final NBA season, this is the only time he's going to come to Atlanta. And so I'm sure that building is going to be absolutely packed for that game. There's probably going to be a lot of LeBron fans, a lot of Sixers LeBron jerseys in that crowd. But regardless, it's going to be a great atmosphere there. And that's one of 8 nationally televised games. The other 7 are January 22nd against the Knicks, January 28th against the Knicks. You have February 16th versus Toronto, March 6th at Cleveland, March 10th at Minnesota, March 13th versus Orlando, and then the last nationally televised game is April 6th at home versus the Knicks.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the amount of LeBron Sixers jerseys on MLK Day. Like, it's gonna be absolutely insane. And that's kinda anywhere LeBron goes. Like,
Yeah.
so, I mean, whether it be the Lakers, Cleveland, it doesn't matter, Miami, like, his fans are just there. So, for the Hawks, their fans gonna have to be in there, be rowdy, and kind of drown out that noise from those guys. But the interesting part about the whole schedule and how it portrays is after that Day game, the Hawks go on a four game away set, all on the East Coast, and then they have one away game against Indiana, and then Mikey, you have 7 straight home games. Like, the Hawks have really favorable home schedule. Like, it's a lot of them in a row. You kinda wanna see that, to be honest with you, because you know how the nights work where, the NBA, you wanna have a lot of games at home, so you're sleeping in your bed at home, and it just makes things a whole lot more easier for the players.
Yeah, I don't believe last season the Hawks had any stretch of games that was seven on the road or 7 at home. I think they had a couple of 6 game homestands. I don't believe there was 7 though. So that's definitely going to be a part where the Hawks are going to want to capitalize here. But going back in the schedule, I did forget to mention one thing before we got to that MLK Day game versus the 76ers. January 2nd, the Dallas Mavericks come to State Farm Arena. So the return of Zachary Risese after he was traded in that Lou Dort and Ryan Nembhard deal. Tim, it's going to be interesting to see if there's going to be a video tribute for Zach. I think with him being the first ever lottery pick the Hawks won, I think there is going to be a video tribute. Obviously, his Hawks career didn't really pan out the way that the organization probably envisioned. But just the history there, the significant aspect of the Hawks winning the lottery, I would imagine there probably is some type of tribute there for Zach coming back.
You could imagine there's gonna be some kinda tribute. My question is, how are the fans going
Hmm.
to, greet Zach? I think that, things didn't go as a lot of Hawks fans would want to see. And, there were a lot of fans calling for him to be traded. There was a lot of fans that wanted him to stay. And the Hawks make the ultimate decision to end up trading him. And we've talked about that trade plenty of times. If you haven't heard it, just go back in our feed and check it out. But I think it'll be interesting to see how the crowd kind of greets Zach. And he didn't have a long tenure here as a Hawk, but he definitely was a first overall draft pick. So there's that.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to more of the schedule here, one thing that Quinn Snyder and multiple players talked about throughout last season was the fact that they were home then away, 2 at home, 2 away. They were always traveling, coming back, couldn't really settle down. And at this portion of the schedule, look, after that 7 game homestand, the Hawks have 4 away, 2 at home, 3 away, 2 at home. So there is kind of something of some of consistency there instead of traveling maybe 1 away, then 2 at home, then 1 away, then 2 at home, coming back so quickly. So I think there is more of that consistency here in this portion of the schedule. But after those 2 at home games, 67 and 68 versus Brooklyn and Orlando, the Hawks then embark on their longest road trip of the season, and that's March 15th to the 24th. 6 games on the road, all on the West Coast. That is going to be heading into April, which means crunch time. Looking at the standings, kind of going to start coming there. So that's going to be an important trip to at least survive it, maybe go around 500, because a lot of times a poor West Coast road trip could really sink a lot of momentum if it goes super poorly.
The interesting part about that West Coast trip is you got some pretty favorable matchups. Like you have Dallas, you have Utah, you have Sacramento. Golden State's going to be interesting this year to see how they are. They definitely have Steph Curry, so there's that. And for me, it's the Lakers and Clippers that are the ones that you don't really know. Is Kawhi going to be on the Clippers? Is Kawhi going to be in Toronto?
And for the
Nobody
Warriors too,
knows.
there's a question like Jimmy Butler maybe could he got it injured himself in February, I believe. So could he come back from a torn ACL by March? I wouldn't rule it out, even though he is older, so he could be playing as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting how that shakes out. And kind of going into the final portion of the schedule after that long West Coast trip, the Hawks have three straight at home against Utah, Minnesota, and the Clippers. Um, Minnesota is going to be a tough matchup, but I think that for this Hawks team, having sturdy ground towards the end of the season where they reach this gauntlet, which is the last 5 games, they have to make sure that they are well seated. And that's why it's so important to make sure you take care of business early in the schedule. Like, we saw a lot of last season where the Hawks would, win a game that, they shouldn't have won and lose games they shouldn't have. And that's kind of the NBA. But the Hawks have to be really particular on making sure they close out games, make sure that they can get all the wins they can, just in case if things go wrong in these last 5 games.
Yeah, and those last 5 games, we'll get into them now. It starts on a Friday, April 2nd, against the Toronto Raptors on the road. Then in Philadelphia on April 4th. Then the last 3 games at home against the New York Knicks on the 6th, at home against Boston on the 9th, and then the Hawks end their regular season, the 82nd game, on April 11th on the road against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So that is five all playoff teams for all playoff teams last season. Obviously, the New York Knicks, the champions there, and Philadelphia made huge upgrades. Toronto made a huge upgrade, assuming that trade somehow goes through and Kawhi goes there. Obviously, you've got Boston, and then you've got Cleveland, been in playoffs for a while now. So definitely, in probably all 5 of these games, Tim, just off the piece of paper, no injuries or whatever, no ring right now, they're probably going to be underdogs in all 5 of those games.
Maybe. Now, say if the Hawks, are close to 50 wins, then maybe they're not. Like, it depends on how the season goes. Like, if you were to take the pen to paper right now before the season starts, yeah, they're probably underdogs. But, for me is how well, does this team play coming down the stretch with, the new additions of Lou Dort, Wiggins, Kingston Flemings. A lot of that stuff can kind of change as the season goes along. And for me, looking at it right now, yeah, they probably should be underdogs. I don't know about Toronto, but for the rest of them, yeah, it makes sense they would be underdogs.
Yeah, well, I guess right now, yeah, Kawhi's not on the roster there technically. So yeah, right now that does make sense you say that. But something that Hawks fans and everybody, including us too, that's going to be really important to note throughout this schedule. Like for years, the Hawks home games have always scheduled to be started at 7:30. They've tipped off around 7:41, 7:42, that area. Now, for this season, most of these home games are going to be slated to start at 7:00 instead of 7:30. So there's going to be that's going to be a big change, and that's good.
And when the NBA schedules you at 7:00, they want you tipping off at 7:00.
Yeah,
it's not 7:12, 7:11. Like they want you tipping off at 7:00. So State Farm Arena is going to have to get used to that. Atlanta traffic sucks.
Yeah.
So, oh man. And I think that has a lot to do with the Atlanta Hawks playing now on, local TV. And, we talked about that a good bit. And them having to be on local air now is awesome. Anybody can watch it. You can buy a $20 antenna from Walmart, hook it up to your TV, and you get the Hawks games all season long. Other than the nationally televised games, NBC, ESPN, Prime, Peacock, all that stuff like that, you might not pick up those stations, but, for the majority of Atlanta Hawks games this season, the Atlanta Hawks are going to be on local TV, and that's huge. And I can imagine a lot of Hawks fans are thanking that they don't have to go to, you know, all these different apps and streaming services to make sure they can watch their favorite team.
Yeah, it's going to be most of the games you're going to be finding on what Peace Sport Network, and then you're going to find it on ANF. So yeah, it should be pretty simple to be able to watch the Hawks, and from there on, that's pretty much the schedule, Tim. Well, obviously, we're gonna go over our initial predictions, awards, winnings, amount of wins, all that later on when the roster's finalized. But right now, FanDuel has the Hawks at plus 360 for a 50-win season and plus 135 for a 45-win season. I think. Look, they had 46 wins last year. I think this team is better, especially with the guard depth that they have than last season. So I think that 45 plus wins there is a pretty good deal right now.
Yeah, I think I'm smashing the the plus 135 right now. If I'm out there making that bet, my early prediction is probably 47, 48 games is kind of where I'm at right now. Now, once the roster's finalized, maybe the Hawks make a trade that kind of changes that. And you know, for me, just looking at the roster now, I think they're better than what we saw last season. I think, they had a whole off season, a lot of the guys to train for their roles and not be kind of thrusted into them due to trades and stuff like that. So for me, I got them, above that plus 45. So I'm smashing that plus 130.
Yep, I agree right there.
So, kind of as we get ready to end off this podcast, Mikey, just your overall thoughts on the schedule. I know we got player spotlight still going on right now. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into this roster and get more into the starting lineup, and we got plenty of special guests lined up as well.
Yeah, player spotlight coming back next week for sure. So make sure you guys have those notifications turned on for the next player spotlight. It should be a pretty interesting one now that we're in the starters from last season at least. So it's going to be a lot of juicy details coming on the podcast.
It definitely will be. And as we go to close off this podcast, I want to encourage everyone to follow at Ethos Hawks on X for all your latest content needs. This podcast has been presented by FanDuel. Mikey, get us out of here.